Hello viewers, welcome to my channel. I'm Hasham. So in this video I'm going to start the problems on trial balance. Last video I have explained you in detail regarding the meaning of the term trial balance, how to make the trial balance, objectives of trial balance, then advantages and limitations of trial balance, what is suspense account, how it is prepared, and the points to be noted while making the trial balance. All these things I have explained in the last video. So if you have not watched those videos, first go to the playlist of my channel, select the subject accounting. In that subject you will find the video of trial balance. Watch the complete video, be acquainted with the concept of trial balance. Then you can easily follow, understand the problems on trial balance. So before starting the problems on trial balance, I expect my viewers to have a printout of the problems which I have given in the link under my description. So below the video you will get the description. Last line of the description you will find the link there. Open the link, get a printout, hard copy, and keep it ready before start watching these problems on trial balance. So take a screenshot of the solution of the problems which I have written on the board, so that you can be able to keep a hard copy or permanent notes of all the solutions of these problems. Then I'll explain all the problems on trial balance. Now I'll start the first problem on trial balance. See the very first problem. Friedrich and Graham were in partnership as accountants with the year ended 31st July. On 31st July 2016, the balances in the books of accounts were as follows. So here two partners are there, Friedrich and Graham. These two partners are running a business, partnership business. At the end of the year 31st July 2016, the balances of the ledger accounts are given. Bank balance debit 4,800. Then cash, fees received, rent paid, wages, administration, drawings, equipment, provision for depreciation, trade receivable, other payable, capital account, Friedrich and Graham, current account, Friedrich and Graham. And the current account of Friedrich at the end of the year is not given. Question mark. That we have to find out. That will be the balancing figure in the trial balance. Because Friedrich current account balance not given. Question mark is given there. We have to find out. Whereas the current account of Graham is given 3,300 credit. Remember, capital account always shows a credit balance, but current account, it may show credit balance or it may show debit balance. The current account may show debit or may show credit, anything, but capital account always credit balance. So we are required to make the trial balance of this partnership business. See carefully here. Friedrich and Graham. Trial balance at 31st July 2016. The two columns I have opened at the extreme right hand side, debit column, credit column, account. So one by one, bank. In the problem, bank account is given 4,800 debit. Sometimes bank account will give debit balance, sometimes credit balance. If it is debit balance, take it in the debit column. If it is credit, that means overdraft, that will be taken in the credit column. So here bank account debit 4,800, I have taken 4,800. Then cash. In the previous video I have explained you the points to be noted while preparing trial balance. The first point, all expenses, all assets, expenses and losses, debit balance. All liabilities, incomes and gains, credit balance. Capital will show credit balance, drawings will show debit balance. Sales revenue will show credit balance. Sales return will show debit balance. Purchases will show debit balance. Purchase returns will show credit balance. Depreciation will show debit balance. Provision for depreciation, credit balance. Irrecoverable debt, debit balance. Allowance for irrecoverable debt, credit balance. Opening inventory, debit balance. Normally closing inventory will not come in the trial balance. Similarly, accrued expenses, that's a liability, credit balance. Prepayment of expenses, that's an asset, debit balance. These are the notes already I have explained in the last video. So keeping in mind those points, now we have to decide which is an asset. If it is an asset, debit balance. If it is an expense, debit balance. If it is a liability, credit balance. If it's an income, credit balance. Now cash. Cash is an asset. Debit balance. So 200 rupees debit balance. Fees received. Fees received is an income. So it will show credit balance. So fees received, income, credit balance. Then rent paid is an expense. So debit balance. Rent paid is an expense, debit balance. Wages, that is an expense, debit balance. Then administration costs, it's an expense, debit balance. Then drawings, I told you drawings always will show debit balance. So here drawings, fried rich 25,000, Graham 16,100, debit balance. Then equipment, it's an asset. Equipment is an asset, it will show debit balance. So equipment, debit balance. Provision for depreciation, it will be taken on the credit side. Depreciation will show debit balance. Depreciation, debit balance. Provision for depreciation, credit balance. So provision for depreciation, credit side. Next one, trade receivable. This is the amount due from customers, credit customers. Trade receivables are the amount due from credit customers. So it's an asset. Trade receivable is an asset. So debit side. Next, other payables. Payable is a liability. Payables are liability. So it will show credit balance. Other payables, credit card. Then capital accounts. Capital accounts always will show credit balance. So capital, fried rich 20,000, Graham 15,000, credit side. Last one is current account. Current account for fried rich not given, question mark is given in the problem. We have to find out. So fried rich balancing figure will take. Then Graham 3,300 credit. Graham is 3,300 credit. So this Graham 3,300 credit column. Right? After taking all these values, now we have to find out what is the total on the credit side, total on the debit side. If you find the total on the credit side, it is coming 1,26,900. Take a calculator and find the total of the credit side. It will come to 1,26,900. If you take the total of the debit column, you are getting 1,26,000. The debit side is short. Debit side total from 4,800 to 17,400. If you add up all these values, you are going to get 1,26,000. Whereas credit side it is 1,26,900. The balancing figure is 900 rupees, debit side less. Debit side less. So here 900 rupees I have taken balancing figure. This is the balancing figure which is not given in the problem. I have calculated. Credit side total minus debit side total, you will get balancing figure 900. This is the current account balance of fried rich. That is not given in the problem, we have calculated. That's it. This is the solution of the first trial balance problem. Now second problem. Stuart is a motorcycle mechanic in Marcheto. He has provided the following balances from his ledgers, but he needs help putting them into a trial balance. So this Stuart has taken all the balances from the ledger accounts, but he is unable to make the trial balance because he don't know which balance should be taken on debit column, which balance to be taken on the credit column. So we have to help Stuart in making the trial balance. Complete the trial balance of Stuart using the balances given below. So here you can see Stuart trial balance, date is not given. Then debit column, credit column, account. One by one we have to decide. We have to decide which item will be taken on debit column, which item will be taken on the credit column. First, revenue. Revenue means sales revenue. Sales always will show credit balance. Sales always will show credit balance. So revenue means sales. So sales revenue, credit side 52,000. Rent is an expense. Rent is an expense, debit balance, debit side. Wages is an expense, debit balance. Electricity bill, that is also an expense, debit balance. Discount received, it's an income. Discount received is an income, it will be taken on the credit side. Discount received, credit column. Discount allowed is a loss. Discount allowed is a loss, so it will show debit balance. So discount allowed debit balance 2300. Next page, trade payable. Trade payable is the amount to be paid to suppliers, credit suppliers. Amount payable to credit suppliers, that is called trade payable, and it's a liability. Trade payable is a liability. It will show credit balance. It will show credit balance. So trade payable, credit side 7200. Trade receivable, it is the amount due from credit customers. Amount due from credit customers, that is trade receivable. That's an income. That is an asset. So trade receivable assets, debit side 8500. Purchases will always shows debit balance. Purchases debit, purchase return credit. Here purchases are given 35200. 35200. Over all the items we have taken. Now we have to see whether trial balance is tallying or not. So in this problem, the total of the debit column is 67,000. 67,000 is the total on the debit column. But credit column, we are having less amount. We are having lesser amount. The balancing figure is 2,600. The 2,600 is short amount on which column? Credit column. So here I am writing 2,600 balancing figure. It's a suspense account. It is a suspense account. When the trial balance does not tally, after taking all the values, if trial balance does not tally, we put the balance in a new account called suspense account. So sometimes the value will be less on debit side, sometimes it may be less on the credit side. Here debit side is more, credit side is less. Credit side is less. So what is the difference between debit total and credit total? The difference is 2,600. So we put 2,600 in that column where we have lesser amount. Lesser amount is at credit side. So suspense account balancing figure. That's it. This is the trial balance second problem. Third problem. Colin Tate has a business providing spare parts for washing machines. His financial year ends on 31st March. At 31st March 2017, his accounts showed the following balances. Prepare Colin's trial balance at 31st March. Last line. Again, it is asking you to make the trial balance. All the values are given. Now you have to decide which item will be taken in debit column and which item to be taken in credit column. That's the rule. See, Colin Tate, trial balance as a 31st March, debit column, credit column, account. The first item is given non-current assets at cost. Non-current assets at cost. I already told you assets will show debit balance. Liabilities will show credit balance. So you have to decide which item is asset, which item is liability. So again and again I am repeating. Non-current asset, it's an asset. So it is a debit balance. So 24,200 debit balance. Then provision for depreciation. In the previous problem also I told you provision for depreciation, that will show credit balance. Only depreciation, debit balance. Provision for depreciation, credit balance. So provision for depreciation, credit side. Next comes inventory at 1st April 2016. This is the opening inventory. Because we are closing the accounts on 31st March 2017. The closing date is 31st March 2017. So opening date is 1st April 2016. The year begins on 1st April 2016. The opening inventory is 4,500. In the last video I told you, opening inventory will show debit balance. Opening inventory will show debit balance. So here inventory on 1st April, opening inventory, debit balance. Balance at bank, in bracket DR is given. DR stands for debit. So specifically given bank balance debit. So here balance at bank, debit side 1250. Next comes revenue. Revenue means sales. Just now I told you in the previous problem. Revenue means sales. It will always show credit balance. So revenue credit side 72,340. Revenue returns. Revenue return means sales return. Revenue return means sales return. Sales return will show debit balance. Sales will show credit balance. Sales return will show debit balance. So revenue I have taken in the credit column. Revenue returns I will take it in the debit column. These are the sales return. Then purchases, it will show debit balance. So purchases debit side 38,150. Carriage outward, it is an expense. Both carriage inward as well as carriage outward, both are expenses. So debit column, student. Now salaries is an expense, debit column. Next comes marketing. Marketing is an expense, debit side, debit column. Heating and lighting, expense, debit column. Equity, equity means capital. We can call it as capital or we can call it as equity. It will show credit balance. Capital always shows credit balance. So equity, credit side 12,500. Last one, drawings. Drawings will show debit balance. So drawings have taken 2,000 debit side. All the items which are given in the problem I have taken. The only thing you have to remember which item should be taken in debit column, which item to be taken in credit column. After taking all this, I have taken the total of debit column. The debit column total happens to be 92,240. Credit side when I made the total, it is coming to 92,240. That means no need of suspense account. The total of debit column and the total of credit column tallied, equal. The trial balance is tallied. No need of any suspense account. That's it. This is the third problem. Now fourth problem, you see. Prepare the trial balance from the list of balances. So again, exactly similar. Trial balance at 31st March 2020. Account debit, credit. First item, bank loan. Bank loan is a liability. So if you have this hard copy, write down here itself. Beside bank loan, liability. And liability will show credit balance. So here bank loan, credit balance 2,000. Because it's a liability. Bank overdraft, that is also a liability. Bank loan and bank overdraft, both are liabilities. Both should be taken in the credit column. Then carriage outward is an expense, debit column. Discount received is an income, credit side. Discount received is an income, credit side. Drawings will show debit balance. Then equity, capital will show credit balance, credit side 19,500. Fixtures, fixtures and fitting are the assets and all assets will show debit balance. So here fixtures and fittings cost is given and provision for depreciation is given. The cost of furniture and fittings, that will be taken under debit column because it's an asset. This fixtures and fitting cost is an asset, so debit side. Whereas provision for depreciation should be taken in the credit column, just like the previous one. General expenses, it's an expenses, debit side, general expenses. Turn the page, next page. Inventory at 1st April 2019, opening inventory. Opening inventory, beginning of the year inventory, that will be taken on the debit side, debit column, 18,750. Just like the previous problem. Provision for irrecoverable debt. I told you in the theory last video, irrecoverable debt is a debit balance, whereas provision for irrecoverable debt will be taken in the credit column. The provision for irrecoverable debt, credit column 300. Next come purchases, debit side. Purchases debit 42,630. Return inward. Return inward means sales return. Return inward means sales return, debit side. Return inwards, debit column. Then revenue is sales, credit column. So revenue will be taken in the credit column, 88,630, 320. Trade payables ledger control account. So trade payable is a liability. Remember, trade payable is a liability. It will show credit balance. So trade payables, credit side. Lastly, trade receivables ledger control account. So trade receivable is an asset. Trade receivable is an asset. So debit side 11,040, 11,040. I have taken all the values which are given in the problem. Now I'll find out the total on the debit side. The debit side total is 1,22,050. And credit side, when I make the total, again it is coming to 1,22,050. That means there is no balancing figure. Suspense account is not required. The total of debit column and the total of credit column both are equal. The trial balance is tallied. That's all. So in this video, 4 problems I have explained in detail each and every item. So if you have watched all these problems, definitely you will be in a position to decide which item should be taken in debit column, which item to be taken in the credit column. Inshallah, we'll continue the next problem in the next video.